Well, happy, healthy, beautiful day once again, friends. Eric Higgins here, holistic health coach and doctor, calling out of Portugal. Cheers to you all joining us on Facebook and, of course, joining us on Instagram. And cheers to you, our guest of the week, of course, is Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolute legend in the field of health. And today we're going to be talking about how fasting and functional medicine can enhance your longevity. As I've mentioned many times before, it's not about the quantity of your life, it's about the quality of your life. Is getting through this journey, this miraculous adventure, feeling good about yourself, feeling strong, feeling able, feeling ready to produce and bring your best self to the table so that you leave this place better than when it was when you arrived. So we're going to be talking about how does fasting impact upon your life? How do you apply this strategy? Why has this been around for so long? And what are the origins of it? And what is the main difference with functional medicine that you can apply to your life right now without having to think about it? Simple strategies that are going to help to enhance your health and longevity. We're on a mission this year to impact the lives of 100,000 people in our organization, sharing these strategies with the world, because why not? They work, they're powerful, they are changing lives on a global scale, and we're going to be here to share as many nuggets of health that we can with you today. But Dr. Bob Rakowski, quick overview on Dr. Bob. His career spanned 33 years as a clinical nutritionist, a chiropractor, a kinesiologist, also has a degree in nursing and, I believe, electrical engineering, someone who really looks at the workings of the body from all standpoints of holistic health and really brings the body into a state of balance. We were just talking about the power of acupuncture before we came on this call. Health is multifaceted, and so are the treatments in which to get us to our best health. So, Dr. Bob, you've excelled in these areas over the last 3+ decades, helping elite athletes to become world champions. We've got Evander Holyfield, former heavyweight boxing champ of the world. We've got Tyson Gay, the only man to ever beat Usain Bolt, I believe, in his latter career anyway. Yeah. We've got high jumpers like Anika McPherson. We've got NFL players, you name it. There's a list of Yao Ming, of course, in the NBA, one of the tallest NBA players of all time. Very interesting story, Dr. Bob, you shared about Yao Ming when his team came into your office about being thorough, because being thorough is very important in life. So let's start off with that, Dr. Bob. How is it being one of those individuals that's played such a key role in not only elite athletes becoming world champions, but having people come into your practice who were sent home to die from the medical system in certain cases, and now, decades later, are alive and well?
Yeah, Eric, I think that just my experimentation, and keep in mind, they call it practice because, you try something and see if it works. The nice thing about what we try is at first do no harm. But I started treating a lot of elite athletes, and then they start sending in their family members. They say, "Okay, you helped me a lot. Do you think you could help my mother who has arthritis, or this person who has this autoimmune disease?" And then it even transitioned to cancer. But there was an article that was published in the medical literature that this was the title of it: "The Application of Sports Nutrition in Critical Care Medicine." And what they came to realize is the same strategies that we use to tune up elite athletes can actually help those people that are fighting for their lives and winning. And I was 20 years ahead of that. It's what I knew. I said, well, that worked for the elite. Let's try it on you. And amazingly enough, I came to the same conclusion a lot earlier, because when we start dealing with principles and we start dealing with biology, we come to realize the same factors keep us all healthy. That doesn't mean we all need the exact same program. In fact, it all needs to be customized. But again, ours is first do no harm. If we work on energy efficiency, if we teach people to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right, I'm going to go out on a limb, not too far on a limb, and say I believe that has universal application.
I love that. Obviously, traditional medicine, as it's known today, has some great merits, there's great advances. There's some really interesting developments when it comes to longevity with the likes of stem cell research and surgeries, which have, saved family members' lives, essentially, which is miraculous in itself. But when it comes to health, there's a vast difference between what is health focused and what is disease care. And I would love for you just to speak to the power of functional medicine. Why is functional medicine or holistic medicine more effective long term as a strategy for longevity and our best health?
Well, it's ancient wisdom that prevention trumps cure. And let's face it, if someone has a really serious life-threatening illness, they probably want to blend in some conventional medicine, some drug medicine, some Western medicine, as some people want to call it, because those are strong, strong, strong tools. But keep in mind, if you're going to take over physiology, then suddenly, the longer you use a drug, the less your body is able to readapt and actually recontrol its issues. I had a woman in an hour ago, and she was prescribed acid blocking medication, a decade ago. And if you look at the original research on that, those were used short term, at most 6 weeks, to help someone heal an ulcer. By the way, which, if you do the right protocol, usually heals in 7 to 10 days. But here she is on it a decade later, and she says, my mind is beginning to slip. My bones are thinning. And she realized that, wow, those are side effects of long-term acid blockers. And so here's what we want to know. The guidelines on medications are all the same: lowest dose, shortest duration. Go to the FDA, and that's what they'll tell you. You want to use the lowest dose possible for the shortest duration possible. Now let's go with functional medicine, the new term for something that's been around for thousands of years: herbal medicine, natural medicine, lifestyle medicine. And since you mentioned Chinese medicine, acupuncture, there were people known as barefoot doctors. And I'll confirm the history of that, but as it was taught to me, these doctors only got paid if you didn't get sick. So think about that. What if you had to make your living keeping people healthy? Well, I think that's a better way to go about it. And we can go back way back when, and people think, are people living longer? Maybe not. Michelangelo was 87 years old when he passed. And so have people lived for a long time, throughout the history of humanity? Sure. Now, before modern conveniences, modern hygiene, and certainly better protection and other elements, people died early. But I think that was trauma, or maybe, a stress-suppressed immune system where they had a horrible infection. But this, what we're calling functional medicine, natural medicine, that's really what's been around since the start of humanity. This drug-based medicine, 100 years, and we're beginning to see that where there's an upside, there's also a huge downside.
For sure. I don't know what the statistic you mentioned on a previous call recently, but it was hundreds of thousands of people in the US alone who actually die because of misprescription or misdiagnosis or being overprescribed a medication. And I've never heard of anyone, being overprescribed a nutritional protocol or a functional medicine protocol. It's unheard of. So you're dealing with some dangerous substances there. So do your due diligence. And you know what, if you feel like, if you are visiting your doctor and they're always just writing a prescription, then you want to make sure that that person is asking you, what is your lifestyle like? Where are your stressors? What are you doing in your life? What's bringing you joy in your life? Otherwise, I would go get a different doctor, to be perfectly honest. What would you feel about that, Dr. Buck?
Well, it's interesting. You put your self in a certain camp of philosophy. And you know what? Those people that are in the philosophy of medicine, I hate to say it, they will live and die with medicine. Whereas the pharmaceutical, where I really think the best thing is to blend it. But what you said is very, very wise, in that if you have a doctor that you synergize with, that you're on the same page with, that honors your value system and can lead you to better health, well, then that's the right doctor for you. And if not, then not. And sometimes there's a paradigm shift for people. So I had a guy come in years ago. This guy was only 50-something years old. He was recovering from prostate cancer surgery. He was wondering if he was ever going to get his love life back. He was about 50 pounds over fat. He was diabetic, hypertensive, and taking 6 different drugs. And when he came in, we started to have a conversation about medicine. He says, well, I've already got the best medical doctor I could imagine. I said, well, how long have you been seeing this medical doctor? He says, well, I've been seeing him 25 years. I said, well, how many drugs were you taking 25 years ago? He said, I wasn't taking any. I said, were you overweight 25 years ago? He said, no. I said, were you diabetic? Were you hypertensive? He said, no. I said, so let me get this straight. In the 25 years that you've been seeing him, you've suddenly had cancer and you're wondering if you're ever going to get your love life back. You have multiple medical maladies. You're taking half a dozen drugs and you're 50 pounds over fat. I said, it doesn't sound like he's been leading you to a better direction of health. And he sat back for a second. I said, look, if you're willing to put the effort in, I'm very confident that within a year, we can get those 50 pounds off. We can get you feeling better and hopefully off of all those medications. Well, I was wrong in my estimate. He was so gung-ho about getting his life back. It was 6 months later, off of all medications, ideal body composition, ideal blood sugar, ideal blood pressure. And, suddenly you may just need that little bit of paradigm shift, because if you keep putting, a sticker on the warning light on your dashboard, and that's what every symptom is, it's just say, hey, you're not doing something right. Pay attention here. Then ultimately the problem grows and grows and grows. And who's to say that didn't lead to his prostate cancer? Diabetes is related to that. Obesity is related to that. Inability to process toxins, which is associated with being chronically inflamed and obese and diabetic. And, then adding more toxins to the mix. So long way to answer that, but really simple with the doctor that's moving you in the direction you want to go, which I hope is in a better health, then keep there. But if not, maybe start looking for something else.
And yeah, absolutely. There's nothing more powerful than the power of referral, I think, for all of time. If you build a relationship with people and build trust, and if they have a good outcome and they give you a referral, that is extremely powerful. So, dig into your network, guys. If you're not happy, then dig into your network, see who's doing really well, who's demonstrating health, figure out who they're going to see as a guidance in their lives, and get a referral. But when it comes to fasting, Dr. Bob, this is something that's been come to the kind of fore of the last couple of decades, really, for more people to explore. But why is fasting such a powerful tool for our health and for our longevity?
Well, when you ask the why, now that may be the most powerful question ever. And they finally have got the insight into the whys. But the simple answer, and non-technical for our listeners, is that it actually enhances so far, we've proven about a half a dozen different survival, and I'll even use the term thrival pathways. So when your body is not spending all its energy digesting, absorbing food, then it still has to live off of some source. And what does it do? It actually breaks down dead, dying, sick, and even malignant cells. And I'm going to go back to 1999, which is the first time I saw it. The journal was Carcinogenesis. Break down the word Genesis, the origin of the beginning of carcino, cancer. What they began to realize in a calorie-restricted state, fasting state, the very first cells that are sacrificed are pre-malignant and malignant cells. And then there's people like David St. Clair out of Harvard that, when he was studying resveratrol, one of the things that he found was it would actually stimulate survival pathways, which, by the way, you could also do with intermittent fasting, but without having to fast. Interestingly enough, David St. Clair sold his resveratrol research and company to Big Pharma for like $700 million. And I'm not aware that anything has happened of that just yet. So part of me has to wonder, did they buy that up to suppress that? And by the way, that might be a conspiracy theory, but Big Pharma, we have to look at that and say, okay, do they do some good? Sure. But do they need some checks and balances? Maybe, right? But we start talking about this process called autophagy, and that's the term of the body actually cleaning out dead and dying cells. And calorie restriction is one of the most proven ways to do it. And by the way, you mentioned the term fasting, but a Nobel Prize was awarded in the early 1930s to a researcher from Cornell named Clive McKay, where he found out that calorie restriction, and intermittent fasting or fasting is one way to do that, was the number one way to increase longevity. And it worked in every single animal species that they had tested. So Eric, as we mentioned, I have a patient on acupuncture needles. So I'm just going to take a few moments and go take care of that patient for a moment.
Absolutely.
And whatever you do to fill in the wisdom or even the entertainment, you're quickly at that too. I'll be back in a moment.
Absolutely. Go do what you do best, Dr. Bob. But yeah, in regards to that as well, we're just going to bring up with Dr. Bob in a moment about the fasting windows, and what's ideal for you. We will touch back on that with Dr. Bob in a moment. But what I find is really interesting is that if you do give yourself a fasted window, that you're allowing your system to basically recover from eating, but also the stressors of going about your day, the basal metabolic rate of just our system turning over requires quite a lot of energy. And if you layer that up with eating the wrong kinds of foods, eating at strange times in the day, which can interfere with your sleep, or combining foods that just antagonize your gut, can really push you into a state of imbalance and stress. And if the gut is stressed, then the brain is going to be stressed, and your whole system is going to be really dragging its heels along the ground. And what I found really interesting about fasting, myself and Isa, we introduced it a couple of years ago. And at first, I was coming from the mentality that, oh no, I'm going to hold on to my functional lean mass as much as I possibly can. So I need to eat every 3 to 4 hours of waking hours. And that's my old way of thinking. That's what I thought for a long, long time. But then I realized, actually, no, you're not going to be losing lean mass if you are fasting for, let's say, up to 14, 16 hours, that it's still going to preserve your muscle mass. As long as your body is allowed to adapt to that frequency, then over time, your system will adjust. So muscle mass is one of those things that is a real key marker for health in the body. So I always encourage my training clients to lift weight, to load the bones, to build upon your total body strength, to get as much functional body mass on your structure as you possibly can, because it plays such a powerful role in stimulating all the organs of the body. It plays a powerful role in longevity for sure. But just being able to deal with the difficulties of life, like life is a physical experience. We're having to really get around and do things and explore our bodies, explore the world and do different things. And there's nothing more soul destroying for me is when I feel injured or weak and I can't do certain things. But knowing that if I'm checking the balances off, am I doing sufficient intermittent fasting? Do I feel good? Am I allowing my system to reset itself? Am I loading my bones? Am I lifting compound lifts, like those bigger lifts, let's say deadlift, lunges, squatting, pushing, pulling, all of these compound movements that are going to really trigger a greater hunger as well. Dr. Bob, was just, how's your patient doing? All good?
Yeah, fabulous. And in fact, I had another patient that needs well, it's not an emergency, like I need to get off the phone and handle it, or off the Zoom and handle it, or off the even StreamYard now we're calling it, and handle it. But I'll take care of them after we're done here.
Awesome. I was just sharing with the guys the importance of stimulating the body, building lean body mass on the frame, on your body, to help with the stressors of life, but also to enhance your longevity, because functional lean mass is a real powerful marker for overall health, which leans into, just with the intermittent fasting, Dr. Bob, or fasting windows. Is there a typical fasting window for an individual, and is there an ideal window for men or women or any individual of any kind of background or career, so to speak?
Yeah, there's a very interesting paradox that you've drawn attention to. And so Tufts University did a huge study, and they even wrote a book called Biomarkers 2000. And what they determined in the year 2000, that's what they call the Biomarkers 2000, was that the top marker of healthy aging and longevity in both men and women was actually muscle mass. And so if you look at that and you realize you're not going to see an anabolic athlete, a strength athlete, a bodybuilder, that would be the extreme of it, doing much of a intermittent fast. In fact, I've treated plenty of bodybuilders, and part of their protocol was to set an alarm to wake up in the middle of the night to get more protein, to keep that anabolic process going. And so you want to look at that and begin to realize, okay, all right, how does that work long term? Well, most of these super powerful athletes aren't going to do it into their 60s or 70s. But in the years that they're competing, if it brings them joy, if it adds value to the world, then why not do that in a healthy way, I might add. And I'll even suggest that I'm trying to think, it was probably about 15 years ago, I had 2 NFL All-Pros come in on a Saturday. It happened to be a weekend that I was in town. Back then, I was doing a lot of traveling and lecturing. And interestingly enough, my son was playing Madden football, the game. And so he knew these players by name. They were both All-Pros. And we went to breakfast. And I was shocked. Now, these were monstrous humans, and one's in the Hall of Fame now. But, they ate so much food for breakfast. And I just looked at them. I said, my God, do you always eat like this? They said, we have to. I said, why, how do you need to eat like that? They said, look, if we don't do a minimum of 6,000 calories a day, as we're in preseason and season, we just waste away. We need this much food to maintain our mass. Now, I'm always going to go for quality over quantity, but here's the deal, right? So if you're a strength athlete, a power athlete, you're probably not going to get your strength or power gains that you're looking for through intermittent fasting. But I would suggest while that career is over, then you can go 14, 16, or 18 hours a day. And sometimes my answers are too technical for most people, but if you know your ApoE genotype, and most of us, 60% are going to be what's called an ApoE33, 16 hours is fine. Those that have the longevity genes, 14 hours is a good window. Those that have less than longevity genes, they need about 18 hours.
Right. And it's something I noticed. I was just mentioning there about the fear of people losing lean body mass if they're fasting on a daily basis. I find, even, let's say, if I'm lifting heavy or I'm doing a strength session, let's say yesterday, when I wake up the following day, I'll find that I'll lean towards eating maybe at 12 hours, that I just intuitively feel, okay, I need to eat now. My system feels like I need to eat. So I don't bind myself to, it has to be 14 hours for me when I introduce this. But I will intuitively say, okay, I'm going to eat particularly animal-based products first after a fast from a previous day's strength session, because I'll feel I need to eat sooner rather than later. I would assume that that's just my own system, Dr. Bob, just communicating with me that, yeah, you need to replace lost glycogen right now so you don't lose your mass.
Well, there's a lot of things I want to say about that. I said if I could actually teach patients one thing only, it would be to learn to listen to their bodies. So you do that very, very well, and it shows in all aspects of your being. And how wonderful is that? But there's a couple things I'm gonna call to that. One, you have way better habits across the board than almost everybody. And my gosh, if you don't have some of the best genes that I've probably ever seen, I don't know who does. So you pick great parents, but here's what I'll often tell people: we all have great genes. We have them because we were supposed to have them, and we need to make the best of them. And you know what? You've done that very effectively. And I would love everybody to honor all of their gifts and utilize them as you have across the board, whatever those gifts are. For some people, it's going to be music. Some people, it's going to be writing. Some people, it's going to be deep thought. Some people, it's going to be teaching. And it's movement and inspiration. So well done.
Well, thank you very much. And always a pleasure to be working with you, Dr. Bob, as well, in many areas, and seeing people to progress. And I think that's really important about teamwork, is finding people, or as you mentioned before, surrounding yourself with coaches that are better than you or excel in different areas than you, so you can learn. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And I think that those are the most important relationships we can nurture. But first and foremost, it has to come with ourselves. We've got to pay attention to what our body is telling us. And if we're not listening, you're fighting an uphill battle. So it's really important for us to listen and adjust. And as one of our coaches would say, Eric Worre, plan, do, review. If you ate a certain food, or you've eaten at a certain time and you have a low energy, lethargic response, or you feel super energized and clear, and you just feel present, then that's probably a good choice. So just being aware, like you said, of what you've eaten, how you respond to it, and how you perform. Because when you put the body under stress and strain, it will reveal either you have checked the boxes of what you need to eat, or when you need to eat, and how much you need to eat, or you'll be severely deficient. You'll feel like trash. You won't have energy. You'll almost feel dizzy and lethargic and everything else. So what other benefits, Dr. Bob, can people expect short-term and long-term from introducing fasting into their lifestyle?
Well, I think a lot of people try it for a couple of different reasons. They don't feel as good as they want to feel. And so if they're not weighing themselves down with the burden of digestion, especially the burden of maybe unhealthy foods or even unhealthy food combinations, whole different topic there. But if they suddenly realize, okay, I don't feel like I should, let's try something. Well, with fasting, they might lose some weight. They might enhance insulin sensitivity. They might kill off those pre-malignant or even malignant cells. And we know if you're carrying around dead weight, and that's not a very good term, but it's accurate, it's gonna weigh on your system. And I don't recall when the first adipocytokine was measured. Most of us are going to store excess calories as body fat. And that fat doesn't just sit there. It sends a lot of messages, of which many are pro-inflammatory and many oppose the action of insulin, and some even recycle the stress hormones. So, I often tell people, we've learned the phrase, at least here in this part of the world, we've heard the phrase little old lady, little old man. But we haven't heard big old lady, big old man. Why? Because big people don't get to be old. Very, very simply, as the body mass index goes up, fertility goes down, cancer risk goes up, diabetes risk goes up, depression risk goes up, dementia risk goes up, and risk of everything, including death, goes up. So weight loss, insulin signaling, having the body essentially cleanse itself, all those things are great benefits.
And being present as well, Dr. Bob, I found there's a really lovely clarity once you pass like the 10, 11, even 12-hour window of just being present with yourself. And I think food, sometimes if it's not good quality, or you think it's good and it's not good, or you ate too much or ate too little, or whatever it may be, you didn't get the right ratios in, there's a lot of business going on. It's almost like it can be harder to focus on what you need to focus on. But when you've that little bit of distance from that digestive process, or the latter ends of the digestive process, it for me anyway, I find a really lovely element of clarity, especially when I have my reishi coffee in the morning. I just find that I'm really truly present and awakening myself in a really lovely and nourishing way.
I want to expand on that a little bit. So first and foremost, there was a researcher, Kelly Brownell, Yale University, that used these exact words: food in this country is engineered to be addictive. So they're actually hijacking your brain chemistry. And by the way, when you're addictive, when you're away from the substance, you actually physiologically need it. So, when people say, I need this, well, they may not be kidding, right? I mean, they're not going to die without it, but they realize that, wow, I get some type of shift in my body chemistry that at least in the moment feels really, really good. Now, Dr. Robert Lustig has done a really good job explaining about sugar and how you get these dopamine receptors, and they're powerfully stimulated, even more powerfully than cocaine. And guess what? There's sugar withdrawal as well. And so if people are in a withdrawal state, well, they may have to go through a 3, 4, maybe at most 5-day period where their body adapts. But I'm going to suggest it's worth going through that pain of adaptation to get your body set to where it can function on its own.
Yeah, I remember that podcast that Pete, I think it was on Clubhouse at the time, he was hosting with Dr. Lustig, and he was talking about the number one contributing factor to Alzheimer's and dementia being processed sugar. And I remember sitting actually with my mum listening to that, and I was trying to get on to kind of give her the wink, because like, Mum, you need to listen to this, because I know you've got a bit of a sweet tooth. And my gran, bless her, she started to dwindle, and she was very, very fond of sweet treats in her latter years. So you can kind of see where, a sweet treat, yeah, on occasion, but not every day, couple of times a day, because it's going to leave that mark on the brain. And as you mentioned before, when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's, is the lack of accessibility to the memory. It's not that the memory's gone, but it's the lack of accessibility to the memory. Could you just expand on that, Dr. Bob, really quick? Because I just thought it was important when you mentioned about sugar and the impact that has.
Yeah, we might even go back 20 years, but they've begun to realize that in many cases, Alzheimer's is a type 3 diabetes of the brain. And there's different mechanisms by which that happens. But fascinatingly enough, you take Alzheimer's patients and you give them a dose of insulin in the nose, and the way that is a direct pathway to the brain. That's an extension of our brain to the external environment. Smell and taste both are, but these Alzheimer's patients would suddenly function better. And Stephen Gundry, amazing character. He was at one point a really good functional cardiologist. I'm not necessarily thrilled about some of the turns he's taken lately, but he had some great research, and his father had severe dementia. And he put him on a ketogenic diet, and amazingly, it went into complete and total remission. And that's easily foundable, but look up Alzheimer's, type 3 diabetes, and you're going to realize that too much sugar is bad for the brain, and for some people, so profoundly destructive that they will develop Alzheimer's.
Okay. And just circling back to the fasting specifically, Dr. Bob, are there any instances where men or women should not fast? Obviously, kids, it's not a great strategy because their systems are running quite high anyway. But when it comes to adult male and female, is there any particular category or time when fasting should be avoided?
Well, I want to go to kids for a second because they studied that too, and ultra, you stunt their growth if you do calorie restriction in kids. So that's why we don't want to do that. But do I want to restrict foods in kids? I don't want kids eating junk. I don't want anybody eating junk. But now we start looking at women, and let's go to this idea of kids again, because if they're pregnant or nursing, no, that's not the time to do intermittent fasting because you've got another life to support. And generally, it's accepted that you need 500 extra calories. And let's face it, I don't know how many moms we have watching this, but I had a fun experience in Mexico. I was in line talking to this woman, and we just had a really good conversation. I said, "What do you do?" She said, "Well, I'm a medical doctor. I'm a neurologist." "Oh, awesome. What brings you to Cancun?" "Well, my family and I are finally taking a vacation." And then she pointed out her little son was about 18 months. And I said, I've got to ask you a question. What's harder, going through medical school, neurology residency, and being a neurologist, or being a mom? She said, "There's no comparison. Being mom by a factor of 10. And so here's someone that has that direct level of experience. So, moms are so special, so amazing. And I would love to see the entire world go the extra mile to love and support moms and help them in any way. Because I just couldn't even imagine. Being a dad has some challenges, but mom, no comparison. So pregnant or nursing, we don't want to do that. And if you're a male and maybe you're in a catabolic state from overtraining or level of illness, by the way, that would apply to women as well, then you probably don't want to do intermittent fasting. And here's what we know. Progesterone actually opposes the action of insulin. So do stress hormones. So the second half of the menstrual cycle after ovulation, where progesterone begins to rise, we know that's not ideal for women to even do a longer intermittent fast in that time frame.
Good to know. Thank you for clarifying that for sure. Oh, I'm getting some feedback here.
Yeah, I don't know why. Let's figure this out. I got it all the way turned down to 0, but suddenly you're booming through my Instagram on my phone. So.
All righty. So enemas, Dr. Bob. This is an interesting topic, but enemas, why are enemas, and particularly coffee enemas, such a good idea alongside of fasting for clearing the system?
So what's fascinating is these have been around for thousands of years. You go back to ancient Egyptians, and they actually did, a rudimentary form of hydrocolonics. I'll take it back to a point where I think people can relate to. We've all heard you are what you eat. That's kind of true. You are what you absorb. That's more true. You are what you don't eliminate. That's most true. So keep in mind, we want the bowels to be eliminating regularly. But before all these poisons in the world, and there's over 80,000 registered toxic chemicals, by the way, the primary job of the liver was to detoxify the bowel. And if you look at the anatomy, there's a whole system of veins that go from the colon, that's called the portal plexus, straight to the liver. And they're going to be processed by the liver before they go back to the heart. So what's the liver doing? It's attempting to clear out those toxins. Now, there's plenty of people, they have their morning coffee and they realize, whoa, suddenly I have the urge to evacuate, to eliminate, to have a bowel movement. And the two go hand in hand. So coffee is known to enhance bowel function. The interesting thing is when you do a coffee enema, it should be a retention enema after a normal bowel movement. That coffee is going to go to the liver. The liver is going to dump bile and toxins, and most people will eliminate. And I tell people, I have had cancer patients going through chemotherapy. And the reason I recommended coffee enemas was I read a book that was written in the 80s called Wellness Against All Odds. At that time, it was a story of 30 cancer patients, all who beat their cancer with nothing but natural remedies. But all 30 of these patients did daily coffee enemas. And so I started recommending that to patients, and I had patients undergoing chemotherapy that lowered their liver enzymes as much as 75 points in a single coffee enema.
Wow.
So you start looking at that and you begin to realize, okay, is there something to this? I literally had a friend of mine from Thailand said, Bob, there's a person on YouTube. They're saying, enemas, coffee enemas are terrible. Nobody should do it. What do you think about that? Total bogus. Now, could you overdo it? Sure. Is there a healthy and unhealthy animal? Sure. We want to do healthy, especially if we use our organic reishi infused. We're not going to coffee. We're not going to get any extra toxins, and we're going to give the body a boost at clearing the toxins. So very, very powerful and time proven. That's really the magic. Is it safe? Is it effective? It's both.
I love it. And just last question before I want to ask a couple of reishi specific questions as well on medicinal mushrooms and how they play into this role of longevity and of course for fasting. But when it comes to food combining, Dr. Bob, why is this so beneficial for gut health and for longevity? Because I know some people sit down for a meal and they're watching the TV and they're just shoveling whatever is from fork to, they're just chugging all the proteins, carbohydrates, starches, oils, fat, you name it, into the system. Why is that so problematic for the gut?
Well, here's what I'm going to suggest, because there's enough people saying I tried it didn't work for me. Maybe some people have such bulletproof digestion that they get away with it. But we go back to Ayurvedic medicine, which goes back to 5000 BC, and that is the history of food combining. Somehow they knew way back when that certain foods went through the process of being digested better in different combinations. And that was hard earned through, I'll just call it human clinical trial. And there's plenty of people that when they combine their foods properly, they notice an instant benefit in digestion. But let's go with the first do no harm strategy. If you actually food combine properly, which means fruits alone, fats and proteins go well together, vegetables and proteins go well together, starches and vegetables go well together, starches and proteins, starches and fats don't go well together. That's easy enough to figure that out. Well, if you combine your foods properly, would that hurt anybody? Now, I'm not suggesting you avoid anything that's nutritious, but eat it in proper combination. And the answer is no. That's a first do no harm strategy. But for some people that we recommend food combining, which, by the way, I do for every gut patient, many of them realize, okay, this was the missing link. This is why I've had chronic digestive disturbance. And you know what? Now, if they get more resilient over time, do they have more latitude? Well, I know they do. I combine my foods properly, let's say 19 out of 20 meals. But that 1 of 20, I have the metabolic and digestive resiliency that I'm okay with it. And I want everybody to get there. And some people might be there now. Some people, they say they could digest nails if they ate them. Well, God bless them, right? That's not me, and that's not most people. In fact, 50% of the US population has chronic digestive disturbance. So easy start, first do no harm, 7,000 years of human clinical use. It's been around for and still practiced today because it works.
I'm just on a personal note, I've really looked at that more closely over the last couple of months. So much better. So much better. I enjoy my food more. I don't get bloated. I don't get crampy. I don't get anything like that where I would mix. So give it a shot, guys. Segregate it like Dr. Bob mentioned and see how you feel and listen. Next questions. I just have 2 other questions, Dr. Bob. I see some questions coming in from Facebook, from our stream as well. But really quickly, I hear from a lot of our reishi customers saying that they feel a lot more full. They don't feel like the need to eat. And of course, alongside of fasting is a really nice strategy to have, particularly our Reishi King of coffee in the morning. I find is an amazing to help facilitate your vibrancy in the morning. And of course, before my workouts, I will have a King, which makes me feel amazing, and combine it with our Reishi and Cordyceps red tea as well. Why is Reishi really letting people feel fuller for longer and kind of boosting that satiety level in the brain?
Well, I like that second term better. I like the term satiety better. And sometimes people think satiety and full go the same, but they don't. If people load up on junk, they can literally have a distended abdomen and still be shoveling it in their face and not knowing why. It's because they have no satiety. And so of the half a dozen fat loss, weight loss benefits, one of the top benefits of reishi is satiety. And do we know everything we need to know about satiety? No, we really don't. But we know that nutrient density is a huge player in it. And there are a lot of other things as well. So then you start looking, okay, it alkalizes the system. What's that going to do? That's going to make every chemical mediator, by the way, even including digestive enzymes, work more efficiently. By lowering the stress hormones in the system, stress hormones are some of the drives for, I'll call it addictive eating behaviors, or compulsive eating, or quick fix eating, however you want to call it. And since reishi lowers the stress hormones in the bloodstream, it's good there too. And there's probably a gazillion other mechanisms as well, but those are the big three.
Love it. That's a morning strategy of ours, Dr. Bob, and a lot of our customers and partners around the world is non-negotiable. Wake up in the morning, hydrate yourself, get some fresh air, kettle on, hot water. Well, kettle where we are. I know you guys in Houston just have the lovely little machine, but have your reishi coffee in the morning because it is so powerful. Top superfood, the most alkaline food on the planet. It is just a wonderment for our health. It is a powerful, powerful way to enhance your immune system. But when it comes to longevity, it's been known for centuries in China as the herb of immortality, which lends to the fact that it really can help with longevity and also to protect and upregulate mitochondria function, which is really important when it comes to longevity. Could you just touch on what is mitochondria, how does reishi impact upon it, and why is that such a big deal when it comes to our health?
Mitochondria, they call the powerhouse of the cell. And by the way, Rokowski's first law, I've got a few laws that I've taught doctors around the world. First one is healthy bodies don't get sick. But one of my other earlier ones was take care of your mitochondria and your mitochondria will take care of you. And it was probably about that time that I came out with that. They came out with the mitochondrial theory of aging. And they found out that as your mitochondria decline, so does your health, wellness, and longevity. So there's a lot of benefits of intermittent fasting and good food choices and even reishi. And what do they all have in common? Mitochondrial benefits. And so these are preserved. The body has to get a lot more efficient in terms of how it makes energy. So keep in mind, if you have glucose in the bloodstream, the body says, okay, quick energy, easy energies. I can make energy from glucose really easy. But when it comes to burning fat, a lot more effort. And that, by the way, happens in the mitochondria. Now, there's an intermediate step, and maybe just someone probably needs to hear this because I'm being led to say this. We store fat as what are known as long-chain triglycerides, but the mitochondria only burn medium and short-chain triglycerides. So there's an intermediate step called peroxisomes that actually break down the long-chain fatty acids into medium and short-chain to feed to the mitochondria to burn. But there's a whole lot of things that have to be efficient in the body for that to happen. By the way, including carnitine, which drives the fat across the mitochondrial membrane. And you need a healthy liver, kidney, and pancreas to make carnitine. So longer answer than we want. But here's the deal. Without mitochondria, we're all dead. With ideal mitochondria, and it's suggested that the most trained elite endurance athletes have their mitochondria are 600% more efficient than the baseline person. And wouldn't we all want to be able to, if we wanted to, right, run 100 miles at a clip? Here's what I tell you. I believe we're all capable of it. If that's your goal, go do it in a healthy way. But other than that, don't we want to have vibrant energy for our entire existence? You bet we do. And taking care of the mitochondria accomplishes that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And for myself, as a non-coffee drinker 9 years ago, included this in my daily routine. My training and mental focus went through the roof. My recovery was faster. I felt like I could do more. I could lift more. I could move better. I was more aware of myself. So guys, if you haven't tried this, we have the best. Try our 1-box challenge. Reach out to whoever shared this with you. Put it to the test. We guarantee you're going to love it. We can't guarantee you love it, but we certainly guarantee you that you're going to get the best that the world has to offer because it's the purest form of this superfood on the planet. Mike on Instagram has said he is flying to the toilet since he's added reishi to his routine. Any comments on that, Dr. Bob, and its digestive benefits?
Well, we certainly have a number of people that have that experience. And the first time I had that, it was a friend of mine who happens to be a chiropractor, and I introduced it to him. And he said, Bob, something's wrong with this coffee. And I said, what do you mean? He says, listen, I'm running to the restroom, 8-10 times a day. I said, really? He says, yeah. I said, well, it doesn't do that to me. Well, keep in mind, I've been, constructively detoxing for over 3 decades, right? And so you look at that, and he says, well, maybe I got a bad box. I said, well, that's possible. Anything's possible, right? So let me try it. So I had half a dozen of his coffees, and I said, it's not the coffee, and by the way, that pretty much resolved in 10 days. And so your body likely has something that you need to get rid of. Now, I don't want you to dehydrate. Let's not be irresponsible. I mean, if you're running and you don't seem to be able to get that under control, maybe there's something else going on there. But based as I heard you say the question or ask the question, I don't think that's the case. I think your body's probably detoxing, and that may be a very good thing for you. But if it goes on for too long, let's have a little deeper conversation. There might be a probiotic issue or something going on there.
For sure. And Mike had another question about fasting. How do you introduce it? I would introduce it slowly, Michael. You don't want to be cantankerous or on the edge. Start slowly to introduce it. Maybe start out with a shorter window. Let's say stop eating at 8 and maybe start with 12, eat after 8 the following morning, see how that feels. And if you can push it out to 10 a.m. without being too cranky, I think that will be a good way to go for sure. What would your thoughts be on that, Dr. Bob?
Well, I'm even slower than that, and how much slow can you get? I tell them, start eating a minute later in the day, and then stop eating a minute earlier in the day. And every day that you can, move it up a minute. Well, if you do that for a month, guess what? Now you're at 60 minutes already longer in your window. 2 months, 2 hours more. And 6 months, well, then maybe you're at that 14. Hopefully you're sleeping 8 hours a night. And just keep going from there. Because let's face it, the majority of our population is what we call metabolically inflexible. And they're not very healthy. And therefore, a longer fasting window may have a negative effect because of the reliance on stress hormones for those individuals. So, what you're suggesting, I think, is going to work for people that are in a moderate health range. What I'm suggesting can even work for those that have extreme metabolic inflexibility.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for clarifying that and giving sharper advice. 3 other small questions here on Facebook, and we'll wrap up there. Hannah says, happy, beautiful day, Dr. Bob. I would like to hear your thoughts on the carnivore diet. Some carnivore experts recommend not drinking coffee.
Well, coffee done right is a superfood, even in and of itself. There was a 5.1 million person follow-up year study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. They found that those people that drink the most coffee live the longest, and the sweet spot, this was more lucky than anything else. It was between 5 or 6 cups a day, which, by the way, is what I've done now for 40 plus years. 5 to 6 cups. There's not many days that I miss 5 or 6 cups, and there's no days that I miss any. So very, very powerful there. But carnivore has application. But keep in mind, we are omnivores, right? I have teeth that are meant for tearing, and then I have canines for other things, and I have molars for grinding. And our entire digestive tract from start to end is basically that of an omnivore. And so you look at a cow, a pure herbivore, they have 5+ stomachs, and they keep ruminating. They throw their food back up so they can chew it again and swallow it. And they do this all day long because their digestive is very inefficient, and they want to get the most out of those plants, and we don't digest plant cell walls. Whereas the carnivore, whole different picture altogether. Now, what's the benefit of carnivore? Well, I'll tell you what, I think for plenty of people, their plant choices are actually feeding bad bugs in their gut, and it's causing an inflammatory or worse condition in their system. So the classic, go to Joe Rogan interviewing Jordan Peterson on the carnivore diet, and there's about a 5 or 7 minute animation where Jordan Peterson said, look, my daughter suffered with autoimmunity since childhood. 30 days into carnivore, it completely resolved. Myself, I had a lot of issues. My daughter Michaela said, try it. I tried it. And at the time, I think Joe Rogan interviewed Jordan Peterson. He was 4 years straight carnivore. I would encourage him to get some plants in his diet, but let's face it, it's working for him. A lot of problems that he was having went away. And not only that, but he's seeing people all over the world that are reporting the same benefit. So I think it'd be a nice change. I think it'll reset the gut, but I do think we're better off, and maybe time will prove me wrong, but I think we're better off with some plants. And let's go to epidemiology. Bruce James, geneticist, Berkeley, one of the top 25 cited scientists of all time. Simple fact: people that eat the most fruits and vegetables get the least cancer. Those that eat the least get the most. Journal of the American Medical Association, 1992, published these words: at every step along the road to malignancy, plant nutrients tend to reduce the likelihood of transmission to the next phase. So there's plenty of data there. And then when we start looking at the blue zones, the areas of the world where people live to 100 most consistently, they had predominantly plant-based, not exclusively, but predominantly plant-based diets.
Super. Other question there, just as we wrap up. Fasting, does fasting mean no intake at all? Well, yeah, apart from water, yeah, even tea would be considered breaking the fast.
Depends on the tea. So,
sure.
So the guidelines are pretty generally simple. And by the way, when you start looking at our reishi infused coffee and tea, there's about 10 calories. Why? Because reishi is very nutritive. It has protein, carbohydrate, fat, fiber, water, et cetera. So, 10 calories. Okay. Can we live with that? Yeah, it's not going to break the fast. But here's what I would encourage you to do. Measure your insulin, measure your ketones, keep track of that. And there's a researcher that's been studying, a metabolic approach to cancer, Thomas Siegfried, for over 50 years. And he has a meter that's available now where you can test both glucose and ketones with a single meter. Pretty powerful. I bought one just to play with it. And it helps people to understand more effectively how everything is, affecting their body. And here's what I can tell you. For me, and probably nearly universal, it enhances insulin signaling, therefore reduces glucose and insulin. Helps fat burning and therefore elevates ketones.
Beautiful. Just last question, because I know you have to go, Dr. Bob. Sorry for the delay, but what if I feel I can't fast? I have high cortisol and blood sugar issues. If I skip a meal, I feel lethargic, shake up, and I sweat. Maybe at some point this is corrected by my body, can sustain fasting.
Well, you'd be the gradual person. You would be the one that says, okay, let's see if I can, cut out a minute, eat a minute later and quit a minute earlier. And then as you handle that, gradually expand that window. But we've got a really nice stress reset. One of my European partners, Camila, literally simplified it. She put melatonin, theanine, other adaptogens, 3 different forms of B12 in a dropper. And I would go to dreamcoast.se and look at the stress reset drops. And she also has webinars that we've done as well. So there might be a faster track to wellness, but you might be the person for now that a longer window is not serving your health.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that, guys. And next week we will be circling around to stress. So tune in for that call. Very last comment, Dr. Bobby, in case this person does themselves a mischief. What temperature should this enema be?
Oh, room temperature, please.
Room.
So what's interesting is, I actually had to clarify that at one particular seminar. And then someone asked, is there a downside? And I said, I'm not aware. I happened to be lecturing in New York. And there was a dentist, and I have to think of his name. It'll come to me. William. He beat pancreatic cancer. And one of the things that he did was coffee enemas consistently. Well, someone's always going to take that to the extreme. And one individual did 19 different coffee enemas, depleted their body of hydration and electrolytes, and died. And when I was lecturing in New York, they said, okay, we had a case where someone died. I said, tell me more. And they told me the story. I said, okay, William Kelly was the dentist's name. A big pioneer in pancreatic cancer, wrote a book called One Answer to Cancer. But I said, okay, first of all, room temperature, don't put it in hot. And secondly, no more than 18 in a given day. So there you go. And by I'm being facetious. If you need more than one, something's not right there.
For sure. Beautiful, Dr. Bob. I know you have to go to serve other clients, so appreciate your time, guys. Appreciate you coming here. Next week, we'll be talking about stress. Over to you just to wrap the call, Dr. Bob. Anything you'd like to close out with?
Well, you know what? Those of you that are making the investment in your health by joining us, awesome. Congratulations to you. If you like what you saw, pay it forward. But additionally, you know what? You look at Reishi Warriors, and what are they about? We're warriors for health, happiness, longevity, getting the most out of life. And Reishi has proven to do that in so many different ways. So I'm going to encourage you, whoever sent you to this, if they're connected to us, go ahead and give it a shot. Try some of our reishi infused coffee and tea. You might even try a reishi coffee enema. And here's what I'll tell you. Maybe, get an alias and publish in the comments if you're a little skittish about that type of thing. But I'll tell you what, I think across the board, most people have been skittish, but even those that were skittish after they did it said, one, that wasn't too bad, and two, I feel a whole lot better. So maybe give it a shot. I've got a patient that's eagerly waiting to see me, so I'm just going to wrap up with good night and God bless. And Eric, thank you always, and your beautiful wife, Isa. So
beautiful.
bye for now.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Go be brilliant. Thank you, guys. Speak to you soon.